Hi everyone, welcome to Make the Call. I was just waiting for my signal from our crack crew in there. Thanks for joining us tonight. We were Bob and I were going to wing it and talk about as we have done in recent weeks a whole panoply of issues. But tonight we're lucky enough. School committee member Dave McGeaney is here with us in studio to talk about an issue that's really been burning the wires in the newspapers. Pretty heated school committee meeting the other night, David. And it's called Common Core, if I get that right.
You got it right.
And it's really becoming a major issue in education. And we wanted to talk to David about it so he can talk to our viewers about it and bring you guys up to snuff on what's going on, because it may be something we're going to be reading about for a little bit time to come. So, David, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was important. I think this was kind of a last-minute thing, so we really appreciate you coming on last minute. But this is an issue, as you'll explain, that is so paramountly important to our educational system and the future of our kids that it really needs to be discussed right now. And so really appreciate you coming on last minute, Dave. So.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you for having me. And you couldn't have said it better, Bob. This is the most important topic in education of our generation.
So we're talking about Common Core.
Common Core.
Now, so let's take it right from the top, because our viewers, a lot of them probably are not really sure what it means.
Yep.
So let's start what it is, what it's trying to replace, and all that kind of stuff. So go ahead.
Common Core, and I wish I was actually here to speak as a proponent of Common Core, because their talk track is quite simple and quick. Common Core is a standardized testing program and a set of standards which will eventually have a curriculum. National standards, which will prepare our students for college and careers, and they will do it equally across all the states. And that's it. Who could be against that?
So when you talk about national standards and testing, and you're talking MCAS.
Well, MCAS is state specific. It's specific to Massachusetts, but you bring up, in my mind, perhaps the most important point as it relates to citizens of Peabody and Massachusetts. Ed reform started in 1993. There was nothing like it prior. Massachusetts spent many, many years developing what became and what we now know as MCAS. As a result of that implementation in '93, and by the way, that's when I first got on the school committee. I actually know what it was like before MCAS and the transition. And in 2005, Massachusetts did something that had never been done before. There's a test called the NEEP test. It's the national test across all states that measures how well each state is doing compared to the other. No state had ever come in first on both sides of the NEEP test, basically one testing math and science and one testing English language arts. Massachusetts was the first state, they did it in 2005, to come in first in both sectors. They then did it again in 2007, 2009, 2011, and again in 2013. They take the test every 2 years. We are #1 in the nation, far and away. No one argues it.
So let's get this straight, David. So what you're saying is that you've got the MCAS, which we've had since 1993 and has worked remarkably well and brought us to the top of the standings as far as education in this country. And now you've got standards coming in that the federal government's proposing that want to replace MCAS, which are already the best standards in the country.
Exactly.
Right.
5 states opted out of Common Core right away.
Okay.
If any state in the union was going to not go into Common Core, it should have been Massachusetts. When you're #1, you don't want to throw away what you've already accomplished in exchange for something that might be, something that's theoretical. It would have made a lot more sense.
It's fixing something that isn't broken.
Exactly. It's a cure for an illness we don't have. And it would have made a lot more sense if they had, these people behind Common Core had said, listen, let's take one of these underperforming states or two. Let's try this theory out there as a pilot program, and if it works well enough there, we'll sell it to other states. The interesting thing, there's so many interesting things, but one of the interesting things is that this was all funded initially and adopted through a coercion project model called Race to the Top. Cities and towns from across the country were basically baited with the promise of money, and all they had to do was to agree to accept these Common Core standards in their school system. You adopt these, we give you money. Now, here's the funny thing. All the cities and towns were desperate for money in 2010, but no one had ever seen the Common Core standards. So cities and towns blindly accepted it. It should never have happened. When instead of spending the $4.4 billion that the Obama administration did to get this thing implemented, it would have made a lot more sense for some of these underperforming states to use the MCAS model,
right,
which we know has worked beautifully. As a matter of fact, Massachusetts not only is #1 in the nation, when it's tested as a separate country on something called the TIMSS, which is the international standard test, Massachusetts figures no less than 6th in the world in science, in math, and in fact, on one of the tests, we finished as high as 3rd, again, behind only Singapore and Korea. So Massachusetts, they should have called it a race to Massachusetts instead of a race to the top, because we really are the gold standard of education.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, I want two things. Has this been this Common Core? You're suggesting, or you're saying it's not been tried anywhere. I mean, there's been no model program. There's been no test to see if it works. So they want to implement something that's never been tried out anywhere.
You're as crazy as that sounds, Dick. You're absolutely right. It's never been tried out.
And so you're saying they want to dump the MCAS in favor, which works,
right,
and we know it works, and it's got a history now of how many years, since 93?
21 years.
20 years.
21 years.
21 years. Yeah. It has a history, and now everybody's used to it, and they understand it,
yeah,
and they know how it works. They want to throw that out in favor of something that's never been, no pilot program, never been modeled, no one knows anything about it.
I just wanted to say it's worse than that, Dick, because the way Dave explains it, and he's right on, is that you've got the MCAS, which are the very best, and we've rated higher than against the world, never mind on top of the United States, but also highly ranked in the world with the MCAS standards. So now you've got basically a situation with Common Core where you got Massachusetts standards coming down like this because those standards are lower, a lower threshold to meet those, and you've got a state, say a poor state like Mississippi, where they last in the union in education, is coming up like this. So it's not doing us any good. It may be bringing up other states, but it's certainly not helping us. It's bringing our standards down.
Now, you had a school committee meeting the other night, and you talked about, it wasn't the other night, but a few weeks ago,
yep,
whatever.
Yep.
And the school committee passed your motion to send a letter to the state education czar.
That's the other part of the story, by the way, which we want Dave to explain,
sure,
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the school committee sent a letter. What was the substance of the letter?
The substance of the letter was we declared that Mitchell Chester, the Commissioner of Education here in Massachusetts, who is overseeing the 2-year test drive, so to speak, of the park, to decide if over those 2 years we determine that park is better than MCAS or
So
MCAS.
Common
Core.
Core. Park is the testing part of Common Core.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's the it's the new MCAS.
All right, correct. And so Mitchell Chester is supposed to evaluate that. All right. Where we have a real problem is that he's also serving in his 3rd term as the chairman of the Board of Governors on Park. Now, I can't imagine that they selected a man to be their chairman 3 years in a row who is kind of indifferent or not entirely sold on Park. So Massachusetts is not getting a fair shake. We don't think it's possible for him to be objective and unbiased.
It's
and
a
that's
bag,
all
it's a bag job. I'll come around and say it's a bag job. You know, you don't have to say it. It's a bag job.
It's worse than that. Legally, it's a conflict of interest.
Right.
I should think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So what was the substance of the motion that you made at the school committee that passed?
Well, what we said was we declared our criticism of the situation, and we sent this letter to Governor Deval Patrick, the Attorney General's office, the State Ethics Commission, the Board of Education, and we asked them to render an opinion because we just feel that I can't even imagine an argument against what we were asking for ultimately, and I think this is a minimum request, that Mitchell Chester either resign from his position on the Board of Education from Massachusetts or resign as the chairman of the governors of the Board of Park.
The vote was 6-0 too, which I, as a citizen and as a taxpayer, I was really happy to see because the school committee is hanging together on this. And hey, this politics is risky business, right? And there's certainly this is not you don't go into this with a faint heart because it's fairly serious business. This is a national mandate right from the administration that we will have these core standards.
Yeah, if I can, it is, and I just want to put a plug in because that's no small statement that you just made,
Right.
Bob. The citizens of Peabody can really be so grateful to their board, of their school committee. They really have dug in and done the research on this. That's not
This
the
is
kind
really
of
fighting
motion.
the power here and standing up for the people they represent.
And they're doing their homework on this. That motion would not have passed if these people really didn't do their homework because it was a very powerful motion. And we're way out ahead of the curve from most cities and towns because most cities and towns, their school committee members, and I talk to them frequently, they don't have quite a handle on what all this Common Core means.
But you brought up a point earlier that the cities and towns have been desperate for revenue, obviously.
Yep.
And accepting this park, this Common Core standards, they got some money for doing it.
Yes, the initial implementation, and that was basically to train some teachers on how to administer the park test and
Right.
so on. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. That barely covers this initial 2-year test drive cost. The real cost is going to be when they start adopting the curriculum, which has to be specially written and adopted to accommodate this park test that supports the Common Core standards. And also, one of the biggest capital expenses is that you must take this park test ultimately on computers. Now, some estimates have been done by the Pioneer Institute, and they are staggering as to what the costs are, and they feel that they've been done very conservatively. But what is astounding to me, and I'm sure it will infuriate any citizen and taxpayer, is the fact that we are running down this road to implement Common Core and Park in Massachusetts, and we have no cost study done to tell us what the impact's going to be. So when they institute this, yet again, another unfunded mandate, and it comes to the school board, our choice is going to be the mandated computers and larger class size, more busing fees, higher athletic fees, and the like. We've been down this road before. We know how this story goes.
What really got me on this day, when you mentioned before the show about the computers, is that they're talking about mandating specific new computers for the test to be taken on, which to me, I mean, all our schools have computers, right? I mean, we're pretty well wired city when it comes to our school department these days compared to the way it used to be. But yet now they're mandating new, separate equipment in order for the kids to take these tests on?
Yeah, they are. They have to meet special requirements. And of course, Bob, you're quite knowledgeable about technology yourself. Technology changes every 3
Right.
years. It becomes it's not as though you make an investment in the computers and then you're all done. Every 3 years, you'll be flipping them over.
Right. There are Global 1,000 Fortune 500 companies out there that are running, say, SAP business software right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when SAP comes in to implement or install, they don't give them all new computers throughout the entire company. They just install it on their mainframe or they find a way to implement it with their existing equipment. That's why this thing stinks to high heaven to me, because I can't imagine any reason why you would need to buy a whole new set of technology or a whole new set of computers in order to run the test. That makes no sense to me at all.
It doesn't, and worse than that, in my opinion, is that because schools will no longer be in local control, you will have to go to Washington to plead
Right.
your case for that. And what do you think the likelihood of us being heard on that is? It's tough enough dealing sometimes at a state level. You get to a federal level, you are out of the loop.
So the MCAS is a state-sponsored testing program.
Exclusively Massachusetts.
And we have control over it. And
Yes.
State control over it. What you're saying here, if I understand you correctly, this Common Core, it's going to be run out of the federal government.
Yeah, well, Department of Education, right?
Absolutely.
And so
they will deny that, by the way,
Right.
Dick. But the facts, refute any of their denials. The Common Core standards are national standards, and it only stands to reason that you're going to teach a curriculum to meet the Common Core standards. The evaluations of the teachers are going to be based on the results of the PARCC test that is going to be monitored at the federal level. So that means that a teacher in a classroom, her career or his career is going to be determined by some bureaucrat in Washington who's looking at some bubble sheets, I suppose, and I wonder if they're going to take into consideration that that teacher may have just had a big influx of some homeless kids who moved into Peabody, maybe staying at one of the hotels, and those were 5 kids who showed up in that teacher's classroom to take the test that day. They're not going to be able to dig that deep. The point of this, in my mind, is education belongs at the local level. Do you know how many times the word education is mentioned in the Constitution?
0.
Bingo.
Right.
Not at all.
Right.
It was always just a given that those things would be a state's right. And by the way, under this Common Core plan, the Massachusetts education miracle that took place could no longer ever happen because we wouldn't be able to do our own little laboratory thing. Massachusetts was around the middle of the pack prior to ed reform. We were about 12th in the nation, and given the fact that our demographics, we have good economics, social
Close
economics,
to the colleges.
yeah,
right.
high
Higher education.
level.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rob, you already take call?
I'm sure.
Well,
yeah.
let's take
just
call,
saying,
David. Go ahead.
Caller, you're on.
Hey, gentlemen, how you doing?
David, can you please turn up the volume? We can't hear it out
We
here.
can't hear anything.
Hey, guys, how you doing? Can you hear me now?
Just barely.
Can you hear me now?
We can't. David, I'm sorry. Can we put that caller on hold and maybe fix
that
this and go
okay?
back to him?
I'll hold on.
Yeah, why don't you hold on? We'll see if we can fix that. But go ahead, David. I'm
That's a shame.
sorry. We'll get the calls with.
Yeah, no, that's really the point I wanted to make. That the whole thing behind Common Core is that it's not about education. I'm telling you, I am not an educational expert, but I do know a lot of educational experts who say that this is a
Can you
total
hear me
scam.
now?
Well, I think we do have the
think
call
we-
now. Okay. Well, go ahead, caller. You're
that
on.
okay?
Yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, guys. My question is, where is the teachers' union on this? I can't believe that they're just sitting by and letting this happen. I mean, they're a powerful union, and not only, should they be listening, to, Peabody's, recommendation, but, they should be standing behind Peabody and making their own stand to say that, no, this isn't the right thing. We spent all this money and look where we are now. Why the heck would we want to dumb down, where we've come from so far?
Go ahead, David.
Okay, good question.
Well, it's a great question. And actually, in some states, teachers' unions have taken a strong position against this. In New York State, a state very much like Massachusetts in many ways, their teachers' union really was up in arms about this. And they have a 2-year pause going on right now with their implementation. I have to cut teachers and administrators a lot of slack here, and I'll tell you why. Right now, Common Core, for better or worse, is what we are marching to. I kind of use the analogy is that while I'm fighting the war, while I'm fighting to stop the war, I still am going to support my soldiers. The superintendent is instructed to kind of deliver Common Core instruction and administer these PARCC tests. And the teachers are instructed to do the best job they can doing that. So the fight, in my mind, really should be coming from school committees, for starters. We're the ones who are the stewards of the school.
Right.
And you
So
said,
what happens if you just don't? What happens if you just keep teaching your MCAS curriculum or whatever that is? I mean, so what are they going to do?
Well, it would be a disservice to the students, I'll tell you. And by the way, I want to preface this remark by saying I think we're going to win this battle because we're right. But if we were not to win it, the students wouldn't be prepared as well as they need to be to take the SAT test. And if I can just explain myself on that a little bit more. The fellow David Coleman, who is considered the architect of Common Core, he's the fellow who's the guy who built it. It was his idea. He brought this about. He is now the president of the College Board, who is in charge of establishing the SATs. Now, about 6 months ago, less than that, I think, about 4 months ago, David Coleman announced that he was modifying the SAT formulas rather radically. And I contend, and many experts contend, that what he has done is he's reducing the standards on the SAT tests to accommodate the lower standards of the Common Core. So some private schools, for instance, are saying, well, we'll be immune to this because we don't have to follow the public education. Well, that's true, but if you want your students to do well on the new SAT scores, you better teach what's on those tests, right?
Right.
But they're probably already being taught what's on those tests. I mean, if MCAS is a higher standard than Common Core, would already be included in that, and they'd already know the stuff that's included in Common Core.
You would think so, caller, but that's in fact not accurate on every level. And remember, in a high-stakes test like that, every question matters. Every question is high stakes by definition. One of the things they've done is, for instance, they've done away with the essay test, the essay portion of the SATs.
Right.
So some
They're
kids
dumbing it down.
They're dumbing it down.
Let me ask you this: if Peabody decides, Carl, I just want to interject 1 minute. If Peabody decides that they're not interested, they don't want to get involved, what's the ramifications of that, and can they do it? Can they have two separate?
Peabody alone can't opt out of Park, but under the rules and the bylaws of Park, all that needs to be done to withdraw from Park, and a few states have done this, is a written notice giving you reasons for why you're withdrawing, and no one really questions the reasons. You just have to give some reasons. And if you do that, you're out in 10 days. Done. Now, that's not likely to happen when the chairman of the Board of Governors of Park is your education commissioner, is it?
No.
Of course not.
No. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I hope that the standards don't change. And my sister was a curriculum director for Melrose, and now she's principal in the school in Lynn. And I remember when she was curriculum director, I mean, how much they put a lot of hard work into the implementing of MCAS and stuff like that. And it just, it seems crazy to see that all, to go to waste. So I hope it doesn't happen. And
I hope it doesn't either. Caller, let me just give you a couple of points on this.
Yeah.
There were two members, only two members of expert, one in the ELA and one in the math and science standards. They were asked to come in on the validation committee. Basically, when the standards were written, they asked these two experts. One of the experts was a woman named Professor Sandra Stotsky. Now, Sandra Stotsky was considered the perfect person to come in and evaluate the standards because she was the one who was probably the architect of the ELA standards of MCAS.
Yeah.
Right? So who better to evaluate whether these standards are good? She thought the standards were so abysmal and challenged them so heavily because they weren't benchmarked internationally, they weren't tested, they didn't even make good common educational sense. They were inappropriate for student levels in many instances. They didn't have emphasis on poetry and arts or nonfiction, and she resigned. Now, she would love to tell the world about what went on in those meetings and what a railroad job it was, but if you joined that validation committee, the first thing they made you do was sign a letter of non-disclosure, agreeing to never say a word about what went on there.
Right.
Her counterpart, a guy named James Milgram, a brilliant mathematician, a dean at Stanford University. This is not a lightweight guy by any means. They brought in these people because of their credentials. He had the same problems with the math segment. He said, the United States will be taking such a terrible step backwards if we adopt these mathematics scores. We will be 2 years behind the international standards under these new Common Core mathematics standards. And he resigned.
Jeez. That really is amazing, that this can go on. But yet, it goes from the top down, and it's, it seems like it's going to get pushed through. I mean, we hope it doesn't, but, you just wonder how much of this is politically motivated.
100% of it.
100%.
To make the administration look good so they can say, oh, look at, now we're doing better.
Yeah.
You're doing better because you dumbed everybody down. So, yeah, we're all doing better, but not really better.
Caller, here's how they'll declare victory. They'll declare victory by shrinking the gap.
Right.
The lower performing states are now much further behind than Massachusetts.
Right.
So, but caller, you are part of the solution. And this show is part of the solution, because the more people learn about Common Core, and you're not going to know everything about Common Core from this show, but hopefully after watching this show, you're going to say to yourself, this is something I need to learn more about. Folks, do your homework on this topic. I have no problem if you do your homework on this and you come to a conclusion that Common Core, despite some of the inherent pitfalls and warts, it's better for the country. That's fine. But what I do know is this: 99% of the people in America have no clue about this monumental change. Again, the biggest change in public education in our country's history, and it's nothing more than a power grab and a money grab. It has nothing to do with higher education and higher standards.
And I'm going to tell you something else, David. You're already starting to see it. I did a little research this afternoon, and the smear campaign is beginning on opponents of this. And we were talking before the show, and you're starting to hear, oh, it's those crazy right-wing people again, and they're against Obama, and they're against the federal government, and they don't want us, the government intruding on what they do, and they're a bunch of kooks and teabaggers and all that.
Right.
But we were talking before the show, and there's a lot of opposition on all sides of the political spectrum here in Massachusetts. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely, and you're right, Bob. That's exactly what they wanted. The pro-Common Core people, they want to marginalize you. They're just crazy radicals. And what they really want to do is they want people not to look into this. So they want to dismiss people who are against it. They call us dissenters, by the way. I must say this. Mitchell Chester, forget about him not being objective. Mitchell Chester just gave a speech about 3 weeks ago in Washington, D.C. As I say, he returns to the scene of the crime. But he gave this speech in Washington, D.C. that was put on by U.S. News, and was for basically engineers and sciences and proponents of that. And his topic that he spoke on was how to handle Common Core dissenters. How to handle them.
Doesn't that sound frightening?
We need to be handled. So that's just the arrogance and disdain they have for us as citizens, for the parents.
Just using the word dissenters itself is,
if I could just, caller, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just one last comment.
Sure.
You could almost equate this to an analogy to, Obamacare or giving the states letting them make their own decisions on how to handle health care, like Romney care, people can say whether that was good or bad, but it was just a Massachusetts decision to go with, Romney care. That was something we made a decision on our own. It wasn't like it was the federal government imposing a national health care policy.
But there's a big difference.
This is exactly what's happening, but in the education realm.
I would argue it's even worse in the education realm, caller, because you could argue that Obamacare is pretty similar and based on Romney Care, right? You could make that argument that they're pretty similar, and now you got to roll it out to all 50 states, whether you agree with it or not. That's not the point. But the point is, this sounds like something that's completely and totally inferior to what we already have.
Yes.
So instead of giving the rest of the country what we had with health care, you're essentially saying to Massachusetts, we're going to give the rest of the country better standards for education and for testing, but we're going to make yours worse in Massachusetts.
Right. Well,
that's what
Thank you, caller.
Right.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Keep doing your homework, caller. That's great.
I have objections. Two things, just from a citizen's point of view, but also, from common sense point of view. If something's working and it's not broken, you don't replace it with something that's never. I'll be right there with that call. I'll be right with you. You don't replace it with something that's never been tried. That's actually an inferior product than the one you already have.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just my opinion.
Well, and even if it may not be inferior. I'm pretty sure it is based on the research I've done. But it's certainly not tested.
But you've mentioned several times that the standards have been dumbed down.
Yeah.
So it's got to be inferior.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Caller, you're on. Caller, are you there? We must have lost it. Can you call back? We'd appreciate it because this is an important topic for everyone. Now, let me ask you this. Can they run two systems at the same time? If we opt out, do they say you're out and then you don't have testing standards?
No, you can't. During this 2-year test drive period, they did allow cities and towns to, on their own, decide whether or not they wanted to go exclusively to the park test or park test and MCAS. Now, Peabody opted to go to both tests. That's kind of tough. And think about the burden that puts on the teachers.
Right.
You're trying to do well on the MCAS. You're trying to do well on the PARCC test. They're not identical.
trying to learn the PAR.
Exactly. But the reason they did that is they said, you know what, if it turns out that MCAS is the better way to go, we don't want to lose 2 years of that curriculum. So we're putting a tremendous amount of burden on our teachers. Our teachers are great. And God bless them in these times especially.
Do we have that call back? We
No.
don't. Okay.
Please
All right.
call back, caller. Sorry about that.
Also, in the control room, can we please make sure that when David's talking that we have him on camera as well, please? We had an issue with the last time. Thank you. Go ahead, Dick. Did you have another question?
No, I think. Go ahead.
All right. The question I had, other question, Dave, was you mentioned earlier about this independent computer system and buying new computers and all this. This strikes me as an enormous data collection initiative too by the federal government. So now they're going to be collecting a lot more data on our kids, on our teachers, on our administrators.
Yeah.
The whole deal. What happens with all this data, and how can we be sure that it's not going to be used for other reasons or other purposes?
You know, again, Peabody School Committee, God bless them, they were ahead of the curve on this. This came up at our school committee meeting about 2 months ago. There's a company that 11 states signed on to, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Commission, who funded most of the Common Core research and implementation. It was a company called, oh my gosh, the name is escaping me, and I know it like my own. But anyway, they were given unprecedented access to data in these 11 states. And the design was, let's see how this works when we start collecting all the data from all the states collected through PARCC. What they found was they were collecting such incredible data that had nothing to do with education that really they weren't supposed to take, and Louisiana found that they were gathering not only student data information, but specific information about their household, their family structure, their social security numbers. They kicked them right out. And this same agency was being used in New York. New York, the implementation in New York has been so horrendous that the governor, who was a proponent of Common Core, had to assemble a hand-picked panel, and one of the first 7 recommendations they made was, you've got to get rid of that data collection agent. And today, I'm happy to tell you, because we certainly took no vote to allow these people access to our data, that company is probably going to go out of business because they have no more clients. Right? So Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation spent $100 million for 18 months worth of a company that no longer exists. I will also tell you this. This opened my eyes to the whole data collection thing. About 6 weeks ago, I put a request into the DESC, Department of Education for Massachusetts, and I said I would like a list of all of the entities that we are currently sharing students' data with. That was 6 weeks ago. I finally had to get the Mass Association of School Committees president involved in this request, and after much lobbying, they agreed to give us the list sometime in the middle of May. Can you imagine that? Well, I'm going to go further than that because now a lot of other school committee members around other communities are equally upset about this. We're going to make it, we're going to ask for legislation that annually every city and town gets that list of who they're sharing the data with. We want to know who has our kids' data, because it's not just being shared with school systems, it's being shared with private parties. There's a law, a protection law on student information called FERPA. Mm-hmm. And sure. FERPA, when Common Core started getting implemented, they realized they were going to have to bring in third-party entities to start analyzing this data and collecting this data. They changed the FERPA laws to accommodate the giving of that information to third-party vendors. Did you vote on that? I didn't vote on that. Would you have voted on that? Would you have agreed to make data from our students more accessible to third parties? Of course not. Now, the data collection piece of this is no small matter, and I'll tell you why. There was a company called WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a company that's about 2 years old, and what it is a company that allows you to text message internationally. You might have used it when you went to your trip, right, overseas, right?
I know of it. I didn't use it, but I know of it.
Well, I did, because it's a great app. That company was only around for 2 years, right? It had 55 employees and no real assets, right? Facebook bought them for $15.5 billion Why? Because they had
information.
data.
They had
Right,
information.
exactly what
So
it was.
imagine what would the data of every student in America throughout their entire K-12 life, what would that data be worth if WhatsApp was worth $15.5 billion?
Do you realize that in the last 15 years, this is a true fact, in the last 15 years, we've created or compiled more data than we had in the entire history of mankind in the last,
Yeah.
I mean, so
well, it grows
it's-
exponentially.
It does. It continues to grow. And this is a really big part of this that no one's really talking a lot about.
Well,
but
they
what
designed-
happens with this?
Yeah, they,
you know?
well, they designed ads,
Right.
to sell products
Yeah.
with it, everything else.
And that's insidious
worse than that.
enough
It's
when-
privacy issues. There's all kinds of
Yeah.
things
Well,
that
yeah.
are going on here.
But I mean, a lot of it is to generate more income by selling people products if they know they need it.
But not to be like Mr. Paranoid here, but it's also the federal government having more information on individual citizens
True.
in general about your likes and dislikes and
Yep.
your abilities and
Your
inabilities
religion,
and your religion.
your-
and
yeah,
it's
your
ridiculous.
family
It's very
structure,
anti-American.
your orientation,
Right.
Your disabilities,
Right.
and
Forget about
it's so
advertisers. That's the
pervasive.
tip of the iceberg. Advertisers. You're right about that, but that's a very small piece of
Yeah,
this.
because again, these computers aren't really designed to bring education to the kids. The computers that they're going to be used for this testing is going to be designed to pull information from the students.
Right.
Now, one of the things.
Before you get into
Okay, I'm
that, I
sorry.
just want to ask people, if you're enjoying the conversation tonight, please give us a call if you have any questions. Pretty important topic, 978-977-0570. Give us a call.
Yep. Can I ask a question of the control room? If you can just, are we having issues with the phones right now? Are people having trouble getting in?
No.
Not that we know of. Okay, great.
okay.
Okay, I just want to let them know. Okay.
So
good.
if the lines are open, so it's an interesting topic. You might have a question or two. Give us a call.
Okay.
Thanks.
So part of this data collection, and the test itself is what's called an adaptive test, which means that no students in the classroom are going to get exactly the same test because the test question you receive is going to be based on how you answered the previous question.
Right.
So if you answered it poorly, you're likely to get an easier question on the next one. If you answered it well, you may get a more difficult question. So the test will never be the same for any particular student. What this allows these data collection people to do is identify strengths and weaknesses, which sounds good enough, but I can tell you similar systems have been used in other countries in our history, not using computers necessarily. And what they used that data in those instances for was to choose careers for people. In the second grade, yeah, you have some math aptitude. I think you'll be an engineer.
Sounds like the old Soviet system.
Well, that's exactly where it was. And they abandoned it.
Right.
Because the United States' strength, I think we can all agree on this, is our individuality, right? Is it not? The fact that one person on their own merits can achieve greatness on their own, with hard work and perseverance and some good mentoring. All of that, we're not widgets. We're not widgets. I know that there are some people who feel that we ought to be. Paul Reville, who was previous commissioner education commissioner in Massachusetts, Paul Reville is now one of these think tank people at Harvard University, and he said publicly, believe it or not, he said, the parents have to understand that the kids don't belong to them. They belong to all of us. Is that right? The kids don't belong to the parents. They really believe that.
He's not alone in that belief.
He is not alone in that
not.
belief, and that's the scary thing, because I'll tell you, it's not a philosophy that suits me, and I don't know too many people who do agree with that, thankfully. And but these people who are making these decisions, like David Coleman, by the way, I mentioned him. He has a degree in philosophy, a brilliant guy. But his degree is in philosophy. Arnie Duncan, the Education Secretary of the United States,
Yeah,
he has a degree in finances. Bill Gates, he has no degree. So the three people who are probably most steering the direction of public education for the future, none of them have ever spent one day in front of a classroom of children. None of them have degrees in education. One's a college dropout. Brilliant people, but not educational experts, and yet they are steering the boat.
So you mentioned, David, or we mentioned that the school committee voted 6-0, unanimous, to send that letter to the governor.
Right.
What's been the reaction in other districts around Peabody and in Massachusetts? Because certainly it's great to see Peabody united on this, but you're not moving the ball anywhere unless you can get a groundswell here from these other districts. So what's been the reaction out there?
Well, the reaction has been what I would expect it to be. Most curiosity. What's this all about? Because believe it or not, as astounding as this may sound, given the stakes of Common Core, most school committee members still don't know much about it, and that's by design. It's intended to be, rather murky. And so I would say the response overall has been great. There's a groundswell. Last night we had a meeting at the Higgins. Our speaker was Jim Sturgis, the executive director of Pioneer Institute. They're a Massachusetts-based national think tank, and he's a national speaker on Common Core and its pitfalls. He spoke to a group that included school committee people from Beverly, from Hamilton, from Wenham, from Saugus. So they're curious about it. That's all we really hope to do, what I hope to do. I would like to convince you, but more than anything else, I want to urge you and compel you to learn about Common Core. There's a lot to know about it. Ignorance is not an option. The stakes are too high. We must take the time to understand what all of the ramifications are of the most monumental change to public education of our generation.
See, that's the scary the thing. We don't know the cost, we don't know the ramifications.
No, we don't.
We don't know the impact that it's going to have on our kids' educations and all that. So it's scary from those points of view. It's scary that that we would even think about, without testing it out first, even think about implementing a new testing system that hasn't been used and throwing out something that's worked. So there's a lot just in that should raise questions of our viewing audience that maybe they ought to start asking. I mean, there's just enough on those things. And we haven't even touched the surface about dumbing down the tests themselves.
Well, what it stems from, Dick, if I may, is a lot of trust. I mean, when parents send their kids off to school and they go to Mrs. Jones' classroom, they trust her, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But that's kind of why there isn't this great need to investigate, because, hey, I'm going to trust my kid in that classroom because I don't think that teacher would harm my child.
We're going to take a call. Caller, you there?
Yes, I am. Good evening, gentlemen. I called earlier, but I was on hold for the longest time.
Sorry about that.
Now, here's a guy who knows about education. Go ahead,
No,
caller.
I don't. And Dave, someone asked me to say they like your can. I guess there was some story behind that. But to go back to what you're talking about,
Mexico.
I always thought education was a state rights. I didn't know the federal government could tell you what you could or could not do. Am I correct on that?
You are 100% correct on that. The Pioneer Institute believes that this is an illegal action, and I agree with Pioneer Institute that the federal government has no right to
I
determine curriculum.
thought education was a state's right.
Yep.
Right.
It's a state site because, it's just like driver's license, marriage license, whatever. Every state does it on their own, and that's something the federal government and Constitution, unless they change it, which they haven't. And to go on about the INCAS, it became an act June 15, 1993. But I'm not really a fan of IMCAS either. I know you like the test, but most, if not all, the people who were the committee chairman of that had never gone to a public school. So it's like you're saying, Gates and the others are making decisions that they're not informed of. They don't have any experience. And so that's a problem. Plus the computers are getting in that. Unless you're computer literate, that's too much tied in that what education should not be about. I know that's what you're talking about.
I agree.
Well, caller, MCAS, I would agree with you that MCAS is not perfect, even though the results are better than anywhere else. It should constantly be tweaked, and it has been since its inception. But you'll recall those years during the discussion before ed reform. There were really volatile meetings but it involved educators, it involved the public.
That's right.
Everything was done in a very, very transparent manner, and there was a compromise and change, and it evolved to what we now know to be the best system that exists. Maybe there are better ones. Yeah.
Well, during that time, I had talked to my people that sat in the committee and said the ones that are the chairpersons really don't know much what they should know, and that's what we're going to get, and that's my impression, because I had gone to my meetings afterwards when they were explaining to, and this is, we tried to tell them what they thought was best was not what we thought as public school teachers would be best. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I go back that time you're saying, but the one thing that always bothered me is that prior to 1993, when they changed the law to have these meetings, every September in PV school, which I can say from experience, we would give them a test, sort of writing prompt on how to write paragraphs and go through the whole test. And they had a number of years they did that to build up so they could make the test. And then when one of the Republican administrations got in, they killed one year we went to school and said, they threw that test out, they're not going to fund it anymore. Mm-hmm. So they had, prior to that time, a number of test results that were about to lead to a thing similar to MCAS, but it was thrown out because it was cut out of the state budget or state requirement at one time. You can check on that. And that's what I always wonder, whatever happened to that information or what would have been a good test that might have been done before the MCAS came in, but they had already cut it out of their budget or the requirement for the cities and towns to do it.
Well, caller, you have forgotten more about education than I will ever know in my lifetime. So I wouldn't get into that.
Stop complimenting him. It goes to his head.
I understand what you're talking about and what it is that the people that are making decisions have no idea because of lack of experience on how it should be done.
And I hear that. Here's the striking difference, though, caller.
That was the thing you were saying without really like to pick it right away. Here we go again, all over again. Same set of circumstances. People coming in that shouldn't be making decisions that are making them, but for some reason they're going to end up having it. But still, there's a state strike, so they shouldn't be able to jam it down your throat because illegally they can't do it. Well, in my opinion.
Well, that analogy, I'll grant you, is similar. But here's the striking difference to me. There was involvement and discussion before MCAS and ed reform was put in.
Right.
There was no transparency at all. So imagine signing non-disclosure statements when you're trying to develop a curriculum for every city and school in the country. This was done by closed doors. The proponents will tell you that it was a states' right initiative. That's nonsense.
Right.
They'll point to the National Governors Association as the board that gave rise to this. Now, when you hear the National Governors Association, most people would think, well, that means all the governors get together and agree.
Right.
That nonsense. That's nothing more than a lobbying group in Washington.
That's right. That's all it is. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, we go back to another experience that right after they passed the Act in 1993, in October 93, they had a meeting at one of the hotels in Peabody, which the assistant educational director was there, and I asked him some questions. He said, "You were planning the audience?" I said, "No, we've been trained on what your law is about." For example, the big flaw, I don't know what's changed because I'm no longer involved, is that I had tried teaching, lifetime teaching that there was revoked because 5 years later, I had to go through certain requirements again, and the requirements were that you had to, every 5 years in between, keep a log with going to school, giving a course, whatever they would accept. Yeah. And then you get recert. And I said, well, who's going to check them? He said, we don't have enough people yet. We'll work on that when it comes to it. So the point is you keep a log for 5 years, you give it to these people, they only take a sample, and then everybody gets recertified. But that's what I asked for things like that. So when they pass it, they weren't too sure on how the things are going to go. All right. But
it's
I had
like,
my 5 lifetime certificates revoked because I didn't know, and they were lifetime at one time until the state legislature said they didn't count anymore.
Okay, it's like if you recall Pelosi when they were passing the was it the Obamacare?
Right.
That wanted to know about the details. And she says,
have to pass
let's pass it first and then we'll read it.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll read it afterwards.
Exactly.
We'll read it afterwards.
Dick, that's exactly what happened. Race to the top.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it.
I know you want to get off. I know it's getting late.
Yeah, I want to get a couple of minutes.
Another call coming too.
I know that, and I just wanted to call in because you're going to ask me later why didn't I call in.
All right. Behave yourself. All right.
Yeah, blame it on us. Go ahead.
We have another call.
Yeah.
All right.
Call there?
I'm going to ask you for a couple of minutes.
Caller, you there?
I got to do a couple of things.
Oh, we're still trying to patch it through.
Well, Dick, your point was perfect because that's exactly what happened with Race to the Top. People agreed to it before they even read it. One state, Kentucky, agreed to it before it had even been written.
Because of the money involved. See,
Yeah, they were desperate for the money, sure. They did it for the right reasons.
They're being bought. Okay.
Go ahead, caller.
Hi there.
Hi.
I have one quick question, and I'm going to hang up and wait for the answer. What does Bill Gates have to do with all of this? I heard you mention Bill Gates. I'm not finding the connection here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I apologize for that, caller, because this is a story that can't be told in 1 hour, unfortunately. But Bill Gates, he funded the National Governors Association. He funded Park. He funded the data collection entity, and not in any small way. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. He funds Achieve, which is what Park came out of, Achieve Inc., and which Governor Patrick serves as one of the 9 board members on Achieve.
Yeah.
So, like so many things in life,
He's involved financially in all of this
he's
stuff.
involved financially, and if you follow the money,
Right.
you will
follow the
find the
trend, right.
answers to the question. Now, Bill Gates, I do want to point out, and not that he needs me to defend him, but Bill Gates does an awful lot of good stuff with his money. He almost single-handedly is funding the eradication of polio around the world. It doesn't mean that everything he does is bad and sinister. At the heart of everything, he's still an entrepreneur. And there are billions and billions and billions of dollars to be made in technology.
Exactly.
And Bill Gates knows a little bit about that. If you are the sole provider of technology and software to every student in America, and schools will never go out of business.
Right.
I don't mean to sound cynical, but the first thing when I heard Bill Gates was involved, I know he's a wonderful human being and everything. My first thought was, he's going to make money someplace.
But that's what it's all about. That's American capitalism, though, and I have no problem with that. That's not Bill Gates to blame here. Right.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying, I right away went to he's going to make some money. Now, the other thing is that I'm wondering, because this is so confusing to everybody. What is Common Core? What are the standards? No one knows any of the details except the insiders.
Yeah.
Even though he's funding it, I wonder if he understands it.
Right.
Because I don't get the sense that he would be dumbing down education. I just don't. To make money. Maybe I'm wrong. If he's eradicating polio and doing all kinds of good stuff, could he really believe that lowering the educational testing standards of our students is the way to go?
Right.
I think it's entirely possible that some of the people involved in this believe it really is a good thing. I think that's entirely possible. And to which I would say they're wrong and they're unbelievably naive, because they are building something that in the wrong hands could be so diabolically terrible for this country that they don't get it.
Well, Dave, you're on the school committee, and Bob and I have talked about certain things on this program over the years, and I'm sure you listened to some of the programs, agreed or not agreed, whatever. But we have talked in the past how mainstreaming kids is a dumbing down of education in a lot of respects.
Can be.
Because you have advanced classes, and you have the average student, and then slower groups, okay? And they're putting everybody together. And who gets hurt in that? Who comes up and who gets hurt? Yeah. It's the same as Mississippi coming up and Massachusetts coming down. It's the same principle.
But this is the whole philosophy. We mentioned this before the show, too, of the people who are running Washington these days, particularly with the administration, which is, and I don't want to, I'm as mainstream as it gets when it comes to my politics, but if you look at this, coming out of the, when you look at where Barack Obama, for example, came from, and what he was led to believe by and taught by his mentors, it's all about, not leaving anyone, making anyone feel bad, and no one, you don't want anyone achieving too much, right?
To give them medals to last place finishes.
Right. God forbid someone should make a lot of make $1 billion in their life. Oh no, they're evil, automatically evil. It doesn't matter because not everyone can make the $1 billion.
Trained to be average.
Everyone's being trained to be average. That's exactly it. Right.
Okay.
Here's
it's
what we
the race to mediocrity. The race to the bottom.
For 20 years or so on the school committee, here's what I've learned. The greatest determination of how well a student's going to do in school is whether they're rich or poor, whether they come from homes with good parenting or incompetent parenting,
That's the biggest
and
one
if they have a disability. And I'm telling you, Common Core doesn't address any one of those things. It's just going to cost us 10 times the amount of money.
So let me ask this, Dave. So, we've mentioned a lot about what are the politics behind this, right? And I just went on a rant on that.
Can you just give me a couple of minutes at the end?
At the end, I will. So this is a real quick question. So before they start calling us here in Peabody a bunch of right-wing crazies who are anti-government, tell the audience about what we talked about earlier about Cambridge and how Cambridge is a very, obviously called the People's Republic. It's a very progressive community. Tell a little about how they feel about it.
Yeah, well, we're causing problems with the proponents of Common Core because we don't fit into any pigeonhole box. They'd love to call us, Tea Party people and radical rights, as you say, Bob. But the fact of the matter is, the City Council in Cambridge just passed this week a motion that says we want to stop Park because we don't know how much it's going to cost.
Right.
Other entities, teachers associations from around the country, certainly not unions. They're liberal in their persuasion. Diane Ravitch, who's a world-renowned educator, served on education committees under several presidential administrations. She's dead against Common Core. So I'm sorry, but we don't fit any singular description. I myself am not a conservative or a liberal. I am a moderate, and I think that's where most Americans are.
Exactly.
All right, I got a couple of minutes. Okay, I just want.
We got 5 minutes. They just told us.
Oh, they 5 minutes? Okay, if you want, because I only need a couple of minutes.
Okay. I was just going to ask, what do you want? What should the viewers do, or the citizens of Peabody do from this point on? What can they do to help the cause?
Okay, real quick. There's a couple of things they need to do. Obviously, educate yourselves, and there are a lot of resources out there. If you go on to, I have a website called Peabody Parents Concerned About Common Core on Facebook. Just type in Peabody Parents Concerned About Common Core. There's another new website that started up that I like very much. It's called Common Core Forum. That too is on Facebook and on the web. It's commoncoreforum.org. Because it's the web, there's a lot of junk out there too, and you're going to have to sift through a fair amount to get to that. But I like to think my website that I put up and this Common Core Forum website is a good screening. We try to keep out kind of the fringe opinions and give you factual information to help you make your decision. So you must educate yourself. There's one other thing that's happening. Senator Kiki Orrell from Bristol has legislation making its way through the State House right now where she's asking for a pause on the implementation of Park until a comprehensive cost study has been done. I don't know how anyone pro-education, radical right, ultra-liberal could argue that we shouldn't go down this road until we at least know what it's going to cost.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that what good government's all about?
I sure hope so.
Okay. Thanks, guys, for giving me a couple of minutes. I just wanted to mention Saturday, I went to a function at the Elks Hall here on Oak Street. My good friend Ed DeLay was honored as the Democrat of the Year. It was a good time. He's well deserved. He's earned his stripes as being active in the Democratic Party. So I wanted to say congratulations to Ed. Well deserved. The other thing I wanted to bring up, that we don't know everything about Peabody historically and whatnot, but do you know in 9 days it's going to be the 60th anniversary of the flume burst here? You remember the
no kidding.
Over here with flooded Peabody Square and flooded.
What anniversary? 60th?
It's 60th. It happened May 16th, 1954. We're going to be.
You were just graduating from college, then,
right? I was just. I think I just graduated from. Suffolk at that. Yeah. I did. But it's the 60th anniversary, and they had to rescue people from Foster Street with like duck boats and whatnot. So I thought that would be a little trivia that people would be interested in. Actually, it was the first time I think that Peabody, the downtown Peabody flooded as bad as it ever did. It was because of that flume up at the Eastman Kodak. So anyway, I thought you'd do history trivia.
I love that stuff.
I know you do. So I know you won't forget that. So
no, I won't.
I know you won't either.
For the record, I was still 9 months away from this world, so I had nothing to do with it.
We got about 1 minute. Dave, give your website one more time, how people can reach it.
Certainly. It's Peabody Parents Concerned About Common Core. Go on Facebook, Peabody Parents Concerned About Common Core, and also commoncoreforum.org, or again on Facebook, just type in Common Core Forum. It's a tremendous resource. We tried to give you just factual information to help you make your decisions and current topical information.
Well, great. We're out of time, but thanks for coming on, Dave, last minute especially. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
It's
And
a
we'll
pleasure
come on
to see
again
you.
to talk.
Good to see you.
know,
Thank
so-
you very much.
Dick, you want to wrap up?
Yep, I do. I want to say thank you to our callers, and I hope you found the discussion interesting. I think it'll be something that we'll be talking about for a while. So we may have to do a follow-up show on
Absolutely.
this, Dave. So keep your schedule open.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you 2 weeks from tonight when we ask you to make the call.